so I guess now I will just get into my personal experience with bloat and why I'm so passionate about educating people about it. I feel like it's something that some dog owners know and some don't. I think vets should be disclosing it a lot more often, especially to larger breeds. But let's just jump into the story. This situation happened in either 2015 or 2016, I don't quite remember. But at this time, I was working at a dog kennel as both a groomer and working in the parks in the daycare section where I would monitor all the dogs. I was a supervisor, and the day that this happened, I was in charge. I believe that it was an opening shift that day, and there also wasn't any management present in the building as well. For the sake of this story, I will be changing some names and leaving out any critical details that might upset either the workplace or the former owner, etc., just so you know. There was a pair of dogs that an owner had dropped off, and they had been with us for I think over a month. Now, the rumor was, I'm not quite sure if this is true or not, but that the owner was in some sort of rehabilitation program. Dogs had been dropped off, and from what I understand, I'm not quite sure, is that for the first little while she was updating about when she would be coming home, etc., but then that kind of trailed off and she wasn't updating anymore. They were just kind of in a limbo. The people that owned the kennel weren't sure if these dogs had been surrendered to us, if the owner was ever going to come back. I believe in the contract it gave some sort of time frame that if we haven't heard from you in a month, then the dogs become our property and the owners have to sign off on that, along with a bunch of other things in the contract. I don't really remember the details of that, but I remember at this time nobody really knew if the owner was coming back or not. Didn't really have a lot of info about her or anything. So on this day, I remember that I was supervising. I don't think I was in the parks that day. I think I was helping in the office. And one of the workers in the back noticed that, let's call this dog Jake. They noticed that Jake, he was a German Shepherd and an older guy. He was acting really weird. He wasn't walking normal. He didn't want to go outside, and his stomach was really expanded. And at this point, when I first got hired on at the kennel, I had a friend that I knew working there, and she told me all about bloat. She told everybody to watch out for bloat. This is something that could happen in the kennels because when the dog's stress levels are raised, they could develop bloat. So the very first thing that I thought when I saw that dog was that Jake has bloat. So unfortunately, the vet clinic that was near us wasn't open that day. So I tried calling my manager, and for a while I couldn't get a hold of her. When I finally did, she said that she would send over a vet to come look at him. So we put him in a room for a while. I had one of the workers stay with him in there with some blankets and try to keep him calm. At this point, he was displaying all the signs of bloat. He was trying to throw up, but he couldn't. He was pacing, he couldn't get comfortable, he didn't want to lay down, he was whining a little bit, and his stomach was just huge. I knew that he had bloat, but my manager would not let me take him to a vet clinic yet. So we waited for the vet to come. He came in, he put a stethoscope to his stomach, and he said, yep, I think he's got bloat, and his stomach might twist. I already knew this, so I was kind of frustrated, but at that point I put Jake in my car and we rushed to the emergency vet clinic at the university. On the way there, he was such a good boy. He jumped in my car, and just like the cutest little guy ever. On the way there, he did throw up a little bit of bile in my car, but I honestly didn't care. When we got there, I went straight to the desk. I told them what I thought was going on. I thought he had GDV and he needed to be looked at immediately. So they took him back. I was sitting in the waiting room, and during this time, both the office at the kennel, me, and my manager were all trying to get a hold of the owner because we knew that there was going to be medical bills that she would have to pay and probably a decision made if she wanted to do surgery. So for probably, I don't even know how long, maybe an hour, everybody was trying to get a hold of her and we couldn't. A vet came out eventually and updated me and told me that he did have bloat and he would need surgery, and that they needed an okay for an owner. At this point, for what they had already done for him to make him comfortable and kind of relieve some of the pressure in his stomach and let out some of that air, the bill was already at $500. She estimated that as long as there was no complications with the surgery would cost about $2,000. And she had strong belief that he would do good in the surgery, he was healthy otherwise, and that he would recover. So we kept trying to get a hold of the owner. We also gave the vet the contact number that we had for her as well. And eventually the vet did get in contact with her. So this is the part where I may start to get emotional. She came back into the waiting room and she told me that she got in contact with the owner and that the owner refused the surgery and was unwilling to pay for it. So therefore, they have to euthanize him. That was really rough. Also, something that was really frustrating at the time was that my work wouldn't agree to pay for the surgery. They didn't know what was gonna happen with this dog, if it was gonna become ours like a rescue or if it was gonna go back to the owner or what. So I don't know if they thought maybe their hands were tied and it was the owner's decision. But when she told me that, sorry, I wanted to make sure that he had someone there with him when he went, just so he knew that he was loved. So I asked her if I could go back with her when they did the euthanization, and she said that would be great. So I followed her back, and he was in the emergency part of the hospital, and actually a few years before I had volunteered in the ER of the veterinary hospital at the university, so I kind of knew where I was. And as soon as I walked through the doors, they had him laying kind of like on a stretcher, and he was awake. He just was very medicated and hooked up to a lot of things. And as soon as I walked through the door, he lifted his head and he wagged his tail. And that was really hard. So I went over there and I just did the best that I could. I just comforted him, and if you've ever had to euthanize an animal before, it's usually a pretty quick process, so he just, I don't know, you know what happens. He just went to sleep. I just made sure I was there for him. I told him I loved him. I kissed his head, and then I left. I went there with this beautiful dog, and I left with nothing. And during the whole time, during the whole time in the hospital, I think I just had like adrenaline pumping and I didn't really know what was going on. So I like held it together really well. I didn't cry at all was good. As soon as I got into my car, I just started bawling. And I just remember like calling some of my family members, and like that's when I was like, I should have saved him. I should have offered to pay for it. Like, why didn't I think of that? And I just felt like so much guilt. That could have been prevented. Him dying could have been prevented if he just would have gotten the surgery. And I guess the moral of the story is that this happened so I can spread awareness to other people so they can watch for it in their pets or at kennels. They can be aware, see the symptoms, and get their dog or cat treatment right away. It doesn't have to end this way. It didn't have to end this way. I still feel awful about this. I think about him all the time. Sorry, I'm just trying to compose myself so I can relay my message. I think about him all the time, and his death will not be for nothing. It will teach and show other people about this condition so it can be prevented. Remember, I was so upset and angry with myself and my work and how everything played out. And literally the crappiest part of that entire situation is that he had a sister that, like his dog sister, that was obviously still at the kennel and was still alive, and eventually the owner surrendered her to us. So if we would have known sooner that he was surrendered to the kennel, then he would have been saved. And it's absolutely awful. I just remember like driving back to the kennel just being so upset and crying, and when I got back there, my manager was finally in, and I went upstairs and I was like, I need to take the rest of the day off. Like, I think it was only halfway through the day. I was like, I can't be here anymore. I remember that I had the next day off, so I just wanted to go home and just like be by myself and just like take it all in, because I was feeling like so much emotion. And I remember being so disappointed in that moment when she was like, oh, well, like, are you sure? Like, can't you just like do out the rest of the day? And I was like, no, I'll get the other groomers to finish my dogs. I'll ask them if they can. And she's like, oh, okay, as long as they'll do that. And I was like, I am not staying here. Like, I need to go home. That is the end of my bloat story and why I feel so passionate about it. I know this has been a heavy one, and I knew I was gonna start crying in this, but thank you so much for watching until the end of this video. If you have any personal bloat stories, I'd love to hear about them down below. Please check out the links that I have in the description box. And once again, thank you so much for supporting me and watching this video. Thanks guys, see you in the next one.